All right, it works. So, hey everyone, this is the Zero Knowledge Study Group called number something. Number five, okay. My name is Georgios. Today we will talk about RSA accumulators. My focus is primarily on scalability and security, but this time we're looking into zero knowledge proofs, which can be used for scalability if we don't always have the zero knowledge aspect of them. So I gave some links in the preparation of the screen share. Let me just share my screen. It shows. I think it works. Okay, so I will try to structure this in a way that I will walk you through a post that I wrote a couple of weeks ago, which describes RSA accumulators. I will explain why they're interesting and why they're not, and perhaps at the end we can have a discussion on what are some possible use cases and what are the limitations. So yeah, the RSA accumulators, they're pretty old, they've been around since 1994. There are a few different types of accumulators. So we all know, I guess, what a Merkle tree is, which is we use the Merkle tree hash, the root of the tree, to commit to a set of data, and then we have a sort of larger proof, which is used to verify that an element is part of that data or not. And so the RSA accumulator, or any accumulator, is exactly that. It's a way to commit to a set of data and then be able to use it. But the one that we will see right now, it has a few nice features, such as that you can also prove membership and non-membership, which the usual Merkle tree structure does not support, for example, non-membership proofs. And also we can do aggregation and batching. And anytime I use the word aggregation, I mean that we take, essentially we have many proofs and we put them all in one constant size proof. And when I say batching, I mean that we have multiple proofs and we can verify them all at once faster than if we verified each one of them separately. And I just want to say that this is not my work. This is all essentially a summary and a rehash of the work that the Stanford cryptography group recently did. So yeah, I'll get to it right now. So firstly, there's a very important building block here that is used, and that is a proof of knowledge of exponentiation, which is used in the accumulators. And so this is also, I should say that this is also used in the verifiable delay functions research, which is very popular lately, particularly for the next iteration of Ethereum and for multiple other projects, as far as I know, are looking into it. And so the proofs of for hidden order groups, they can be used essentially to, we have a number, we have the number 16, and I want to prove to you that I know it's discrete log base 2. So for example, in this case, it is 4. And the two parts that you need to do is that, okay, firstly, I need to send you the number, I need to send you 4, and you also need to perform the operation. You need to do 2 to the 4 equals 16 to be sure that I actually know it. But for actually large numbers, this is not practical. So for this one, okay, it's very easy. But if we have if you want to calculate a huge number, even transmitting the number can be a lot to do it. For example, if you wanted to put 2000-bit numbers on the EVM, it costs a lot of gas and you cannot do it consistently. So firstly, the paper that describes a very a new scheme, which is the proof of exponentiation, which essentially, okay, I have the value x. Basically we have the value w, that is the full value. We have the base, which is known also, the u, and the x, which is what the prover is trying to convince the verifier. And what happens is that the verifier sends, firstly, this is an interactive protocol, by the way, and they can be made non-interactive via the Fiat-Shamir heuristic, so which I will explain in a bit, in case this is not known. So firstly, the verifier sends a large L to the prover, which is a challenge. And this challenge is basically, it must be a prime number, because otherwise the prover can do some sort of attack, which I will also get into it in a bit. with which they can fool the verifier. And what happens is that when I receive, so like let's say Anna wants to prove to me that I want to prove to Anna that I know some discrete log, she sends me the L, and then I calculate, I do like Euclidean division. So if I receive a challenge L, which is like 5 and my number is 16, I will produce Q equals 3 and R equals 1, which is the Q and R which make up the quotient and the residue. And then what I will do is that I will send you the base to the Q, then you will calculate the R on your own, and you will check that this equation holds. And when you do this, you end up like by doing the math, which I have right here. You end up, we exploit all the exponentiations here, and you end up like being convinced that I sent you less data, but you actually were able to verify that that I actually know the X that actually does this computation. And so is it clear like so far, or should I think I should also like maybe describe the use cases now, or do you want to get into this later?
I would love some use cases just to ground it in.
Right, yeah, because I lost my flow on that. So okay, firstly, the use cases for this are for stateless blockchains, whereby the stateless blockchain is essentially like a very, very light blockchain where like maybe if you know Coda, like so instead of like having to verify the whole blockchain from Genesis, you just get one succinct like whatever, like digest some proof, and you can be sure that this is the state of the blockchain, and you don't need to store anything else in your local storage. So this is very useful because okay, you have like a very small, very compact blockchain, which is a good thing to have in my books. And also, instead of that, this can also be used to do shorter interactive oracle proofs, which I think that you guys have studied in the past in the Starks workshops. So generally, the interactive oracle proofs, they work that essentially I have a very large digest, like a very large amount of data, some very large amount of data that is the proof. And instead of having to send you the whole proof, you send me challenges at parts of the proof. And statistically, if I am able to answer to a lot of your challenges correctly, it probably means that I know the whole proof. However, this requires a lot of like number of interactions, and I also need to send you a lot of data because I need to send you one Merkle branch for each proof. So instead, with this construction, you can aggregate all the proofs. You can put them in one succinct like proof, and instead of having to do it in multiple steps or in multiple parts, you do it all in once. So all this essentially, it doesn't allow you to do new things. It allows you to do things that we know already to do much, much more efficiently. So is it clear what I described? Okay, cool. So turns out that the previous scheme that I described, it's good. We can avoid essentially to have to perform the exponentiation, but we still need to send over the X value to the verifier. So what if we could do better? So like why instead of like sending X, we can, in the previous example, we see that the verifier computes the R. So what we can do in the alternative case is that we can calculate the R ourselves. But this opens up to an attack which essentially the prover can calculate some X. The prover can pick a value X, the discrete log, and if that X turns out to be coprime with the challenge, which in this case, it's very easy to do because you pick the R, you can fool any verifier arbitrarily. So for any value, you can persuade them that you know the discrete log without knowing it. So what we need to do is that, and this is an attack that works only for like when the attacker picks the base. So what you can do is that you augment the protocol. So instead of just like you also send R, but instead of just the verifier, instead of just checking the first equation that we had in the previous example, they also check one more equation. So they check that you know the verifier base, the arbitrary base, So you know the discrete log with the arbitrary base, but you also need to prove that this is also a discrete. You also know a discrete log for the base g, where the base g it's a known base, and so this is basically like how the whole goal here is to make a small proof about the knowledge of a discrete log. This is like the building block that we have, and the small problem with this is that now the proof it's two elements. It's this element and this element. So alternatively, we can reduce the proof to just one group element by making it by adding one more step of interaction. So I'm just like glossing over the math like very quick so that I can just get to the actual accumulator so that all this starts to make some actual sense. And so then the proof becomes like it's just one element. It's just this one thing. And after we have this proof, like we can be sure that like in two steps, like we convince a verifier. So firstly, let me just like very quickly say why the challenge that the verifier sends to the prover must be a prime number. It is because in the attacker can basically do some sort of pre-computation attack. So the attack would be like, I have some huge number, like this whatever x that I want to prove, and okay, I indeed know the discrete log of the w base y, but while knowing this discrete log, I also claim that I know another discrete log, like let's say g to the x, the x base, the discrete log of x, y base g. And so when the verifier sends me the challenge, if I am able to produce two values such that the challenge divides my original number, and basically there is no residue if the r equals 0, I can fool any verifier about me knowing the discrete log. And this happens, and if this happens, basically the protocol is broken, so we cannot work with it. So basically the corollary from all this is that the challenge needs to be a prime number. And this sets some limitation to basically how to construct the protocol, because then you're bound like you need to pick a large prime number that the attacker cannot predict. And this exactly is why it becomes harder when we want to convert the proof to a non-interactive one, because the Fiat-Shamir heuristic basically says that whenever you have some interactive protocol, you can replace that has some sort of randomness or some sort of value that gets sent from the verifier to the prover. You use a hash function which maps the current data of the protocol to the value that you need to find. And this is secure only if the hash function cannot be the proper term is if it's secure in the random oracle model, or if the value basically cannot be manipulated from any side. So basically, in this example, the protocol becomes non-interactive, but we need to have a hash to prime function, so that basically you give it some input and it gives you out like a prime number. And this, it turns out, you can either like basically just keep hashing, like do a Ketchuk hash or something, and it will give you a prime number eventually, and you always check that it's a prime number. And this works, but again, if you want to do the verification,
be unique.
Sorry?
Do the prime numbers have to be unique across the entire sort of accumulated set, or no?
No, so the prime number must not be an element of the accumulated set. So essentially what you would do is that you would put a barrier to the biggest number that is in the set, and your prime number must be larger than that. Because otherwise I will show you why. Because otherwise, if you're trying to prove, basically, if you want to prove the discrete log of 7 and the challenge comes and it is 7, you can produce the attack that I wrote above, where you just divide. So here, it doesn't matter, like we just wanted to be a prime, we just wanted to, here, even if it wasn't, basically here what happens is that the challenge is a part of the X. So if the accumulated elements are include the challenge inside it, you can produce this attack potentially. So it's better that you pick like a challenge that is larger than that, because otherwise an attacker can potentially fool you. Right. So so let's say that this works, and now what we have is that we have a protocol that in one step I can just send you one like succinct proof, like one group element, and this proof it can convince you that I know the discrete log of some number based some other number. Okay, fine. Why is all this useful? And let me just say that these proofs can also be done in zero knowledge without like revealing information to the verifier about like what you were proving. And this can be used for constructing blind accumulators, which I'll also get into it. So the RSA accumulator. So firstly, the RSA accumulator, we need to initialize it. The RSA accumulator, it's basically defined by a function which has this property, the quasi-commutative property, which all jargon has said, like you can just say that is like you exponentiate one number to another. And that works because it holds this function. And when you initialize the RSA accumulator, you need to pick a number that is large, but you do not know the factorization of. So it's similarly to how you have like your public key, your RSA public key, but you cannot, your P and Q, the private values, they are like your private key. So what happens is that if somebody knows the factorization of the number, of the modules n, if somebody knows it, then they can produce fake proofs. So how can we tackle that? Like how can we generate? Essentially, the question here is you have two small numbers, you have two prime numbers, you multiply them, you get the modulus n, and then you forget the original two numbers. How can you prove that you forgot these two original numbers? And there's a couple of ways to do this. Like firstly, you can either take the RSA 2048 number, which has $200,000 bounty on it for its factorization, or you can do some secure multi-party computation similar to what Zcash does, or in that sense. And there's another way to do it, which is called, which is a mathematical concept called class groups, which is currently being studied. There's a competition made by Chia, as far as I know, which they're basically trying to benchmark and create and be able to generate this type of number in a very, very fast way. So, okay, we have our function. We say that we will use this function. We have our RSA modules. What is the accumulator? So the accumulator is basically something of this form. Like you have an original element, and when you want to add an element to the accumulator, you just raise the accumulator to the value. So if I have, let's say that we have some element. So initially we set the accumulator to be some generator value. Let's say that is G, whatever. Like it's some number we agree upon in the beginning, which is put in the common reference string. When I want to add the element 5 to the accumulator, I take the previous value and I raise it to the 5th. When I want to add the element 3, I take the previous value and I raise it to the 3, and so on and so forth. This is why, like, we call it an accumulator, because like you basically keep adding and adding and adding stuff onto it. And then, like now we will see why the proof of knowledge of exponent is required. Like, and then what you, in order to prove that your element, let's say that you want to prove membership of 3 in this accumulator here. To do that, you would need to show 3, and you will need to also show that, you know, there's a cofactor like that the verifier can check that they add up to the total accumulator. Because if you cannot show that, so if I wanted to prove 7 into this accumulator, I wouldn't be able to. Because if I divided 165 by 7, it would give me some number which is not a product of the primes that were of the other primes in the set. So does this make sense, like how I'm describing the membership proof?
I think just one thing is, how far into the summary are you? Because in terms of time,
60%.
60%. All right.
Yeah, it's not a summary.
Can you go faster through the rest?
Okay. Yeah. I got you. Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, you prove membership this way. And the thing is that when this witness right now, it's 55 and 3. It's easy to calculate. But it turns out that if we have like millions of numbers, and if you want to prove like if your V is like a huge, like a 2000-bit number, and then your cofactor will be an even bigger number, you cannot transmit neither the number nor the cofactor. So what you do is that you utilize the proof of knowledge of exponent protocol, so that you can just like send the succinct proof that you know the cofactor, that you know and that is the proof of membership. Okay, so in the same way, you can calculate, you can do a similar protocol, and you can show like non-membership. I will skip like this part. And there's also a few ways that you can hash like to the prime number. And the problem is that the elements in the RSA accumulator, they must be prime numbers, because let's say that we have like a 6 inside of the accumulator, so 5, 6, 11. Like I can prove knowledge of 3. I can like convince you that I know that 3 is in the dataset without it being in the dataset, because 3 is part of 6. But yeah, I hope this makes sense. Yeah. So we can also aggregate these proofs. So instead of like proving just 3 separately, 5 separately, 7 separately, I can just take 3, 7, 11, I multiply them, and I get a cofactor like out of all of them together. And this is like when the succinct proofs I described earlier start to make sense, because you start batching, you start aggregating all the elements together. And also you can like do a few other tricks to verify, to basically batch the verification. But there is no efficient way to do the aggregation of the non-membership proofs, because yeah, you cannot do it, because currently, if you want to take multiple non-membership proofs, it keeps growing like the more elements you're trying to prove. For removing the trusted setup, there's this class groups construction, which is in the TRIA competition that you may check. And yeah, and in addition to the RSA accumulator, there's also like what is called the vector commitment that they describe, which basically the vector commitment, it allows you like to, instead of committing to just like a Merkle tree, basically commits to a data set. If you are able to, and in the Merkle tree, a Merkle tree is basically a vector commitment, because you say that I know an element at the 5th index, let's say, of the Merkle tree, and there's no way that there is another element in that 5th index. And this is what they use in the interactive oracle proofs. But if you want to open, the word here is open, when I open essentially a commitment like of a Merkle tree, I'm opening at a specific slot. But if I want to do this for multiple indexes, this is not possible. I need to send you one Merkle proof separately. So this, the vector commitment scheme, it allows you to take all these and do them in one step. And yeah, and I have some reference here, like in case you guys are interested more.
Yeah, nice. Thanks.
So
Thanks
it should have been a bit more. The proofs are succinct. My discussion wasn't succinct.
No worries. It's good. I think, yeah, I mean, in general, we want like a summary of it, because we assume that people have like also done some work on it. But I think it's a dense topic, so I understand that you wanted to like actually cover a lot of it.
Yeah, great. So then we'll open it up to those on the call to ask questions. And yeah, I'll record them so I can kind of can guide us through the discussion part.
So I'll start with a little naive question. I'm trying to connect the notion of sort of UTXO data. How does it get into this, right? So I'm trying, which sort of form or where does the UTXO data sort of come into this to make sure that it's included, or how is it transformed in order to be included in one of these proofs?
You accumulate the ID of the UTXO, the hash of the UTXO.
So in the case of Coda, because that was my question was about like how Coda.
Oh, so Coda is different. Coda is different. Sorry, I just used it as an example of why a stateless blockchain or why a very succinct blockchain is useful.
Oh, it's okay. It's not.
Yeah, I do not think that they use that. No.
Okay.
Coda uses snarks, as far as I know.
Yeah. Okay, I see. It's
yeah.
Instead of okay.
But the end goal is the same, that you want to be able to verify the state of the blockchain like in a very small time.
No, so and And because this is based on hashes, does
No,
this?
this is not based on hashes.
Well, so I'm sorry. So it's the input. The
This is
input
not
can be
quantum
a hash.
secure.
Yeah. So the input can be a hash of a UTXO. Is correct?
If you design it to be like this. So here I'm not describing like the actual, like how you would take the UTXO set and put it in the accumulator.
Mhm.
You could put you could I guess that you could take a hash to prime. So essentially you have some UTXO, you hash it to prime, you produce an ID, and this ID is the UTXO, and you accumulate that ID in the data set. So let me just say, this is okay. This was the part that maybe I didn't make clear. This does not remove the need for full nodes. Full nodes are
it
still
has to be somewhere.
yes,
At some point.
yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. This allows, sorry, stateless blockchain. I said stateless blockchain. It allows stateless light clients. This is like a huge difference actually. So it allows for stateless light clients in the sense that you do not need to get the whole blockchain. But yes, sure, there are clients. There needs to be the full data somewhere.
Yeah, or clients that might just contain or store the transactions that they care about.
Yeah,
like
also exactly.
Medium clients, let's call them.
Yeah, so this is exactly why this is very useful in Plasma, because you do not make any data in Plasma. You must not make any data availability assumptions, because you can never know if the data will be available or not, because you assume that there is some evil database manager who will never have the data available. So what you can do is that you can instead just only keep the parts of the data that you care about. So this is like where it matches with the Plasma. So
it's also similar to Coda there, because they're the same. They also
okay, yeah, you only hold the data about the UTXOs that you care about. Yeah, exactly. And the very useful thing here is that the non-membership proofs, they can be used to essentially say that from block 1 to block 100, this UTXO was not spent with just one proof. While otherwise, I would need to send you 100 Merkle proofs, and I would need to say it was not included in block 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But the notion of inclusion is much easier to calculate based on the last thing you said.
Yes, exactly. The notion, basically, when you want to calculate a membership proof, it's just you get the cofactor, and you need to prove knowledge of the cofactor, which is very easy if you know actually the element, because you just do a division. While for the non-membership proof, you need to do like a couple more steps, and this is the part that I kind of glossed over, which is this thing. They're called the Bézout coefficients. You just break down a number to two other numbers, and the verifier tries to, and you send these two other numbers to the verifier. And these two numbers, they're used by the verifier to check that your item was not included.
So one more question, then I'll shut up. Because, and I think of sort of UTXOs as a very simple notion of state, and because this is sort of one of the applications, this could be sort of hashing a UTXO and then hashing to prime using this. Is there anything that stops you from hashing a more complex state and then sort of marking it, or and using the more complex state sort of as proof that it's there?
So I'm not sure if this makes sense for the RSA accumulator, because what you're essentially saying is that you're just attesting to some state. Okay, you said that this state was part of the accumulator. Why is this useful though? What you can alternatively do is that this is where the vector commitment comes in, and you can basically just say that this account with this address has this balance, this other account with this address has this balance, and so on. And this becomes, and then you make a commitment out of this. Like, I think this is what you had in mind, like to basically make an accumulator. Sorry? Like, and basically you want to make an accumulator for an account-based model, perhaps, instead of UTXO-based.
Yeah, and then that's sort of where my mind is wandering in terms of
yeah. So exactly. So exactly. Imagine that you have a vector, like let's say 10 slots, and like each one of the items in the vector, like the 0th Index is like the 0th address. Let's say like its address, if like it's, let's say that it's 1357911, 1357111, and like the 1, it's a hash to prime of some address. So that is the index of the element, and the value inside it is your account balance. So you can essentially make an accumulator out of a key value store, and you can use that also for live clients. But this is not like this in the paper. This is like very, very briefly described, but it's definitely possible.
I was thinking actually even more complex in terms of, if there's a more complex state beyond just a balance of multiple key value pairs, but it sounds like this could be supported.
Noted.
Oh, I think I broke up.
Now we can hear you. I think Georgios.
Am I lagging?
Georgios lagging, yeah.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, and I'll just say that these schemes are not also, because they're based on the RSA factorization, that they're not quantum secure, if anybody cares about this year. And basically, yeah, if there's a quantum computer, like this scheme breaks because they can factorize the modulus and they can create fake proofs. So it's a very neat scheme, but if you're looking to be like quantum resistant, like Starks, there's also hash-based accumulators, which I believe Tad's Dryja, like the author of the Lightning Network paper, has written about in a technique called U3XO, like UTXO3. And yeah, you can look into that if you want to check on maybe an accumulator that's quantum resistant.
So one question I'd like to ask about RSA accumulators. So what's the complexity like for the prover?
For the prover, like what? It's just calculating the cofactor. So it's all of one. Everything is all of one. There's no
All of one?
It's
Counting the cofactor doesn't sound like O of one to me.
Yeah, okay, so sorry, I had something else in mind. Yeah, okay, so this protocol is only useful if you can produce the residue, if you can perform the division when you're producing the Q and L values, when you need to produce the proof. It's only useful, it's as slow as the division is, basically.
So you know the exponent of the true thing.
Yes.
You just divide it quickly.
Yeah.
Which would be log, but then you still need to compute these exponents, right?
Can you like describe it step by step, so that, because I don't get your question?
So we still have to do the exponentiation.
No, you know it already. Okay, that's what you're saying. So the
factor.
Yeah. So yes, you need to do the exponentiation, but this exponentiation you can parallelize it.
So it's going to be log time or something. Yeah.
Yes, you can, because the proof of exponentiation scheme, the generation of the proof, it can be parallelized. Yes, and you can do it like in a similar way, like in a divide and conquer, similar to how the fast Fourier transform works. And yeah, you can do it in log time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I mean, still sort of wonder whether you can apply this to Starks, which most of the Stark proof is the Merkle proof, but
so you mean
complexity?
So you mean replacing the Merkle tree in the Stark with another accumulator in that sense? I see.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I wasn't sure about. Maybe you have an idea on this. When we're saying that the L, the L must be prime or at least factored to large primes, but then we don't want it too small because it shouldn't be inside of the set of elements that could be in the accumulator. Is there a minimum, or like is there some kind of
you need to define what is the biggest. It's a security parameter. basically you define a security parameter that shows how many primes that you will sample from, essentially, and that's it. But also you need to like bound it from the start so that the lower bound is bigger than all the accumulated elements. So for example, if your data set would be numbers 3, 5, 7, 11,
yeah,
it would need to be bigger than 11.
Okay, so yeah, so this was it. Like having the +1, like the +1th prime number would be okay in this protocol.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And yeah, so, and I don't think there's an easier way like currently than just like iterating. Basically, you just keep hashing and hashing and hashing, and you always do the Miller-Rabin primality test until you find the prime that suits your needs.
So this is actually where I was going to go with it. That sounds, I don't know, that doesn't sound very good. That you're just going to do some number of rounds of hashing, and additionally you need to do a prime check. Is there any ways to speed that up, or
so what you could do is that you could so normally if you run this in the Ethereum virtual machine, for example, the verifier, because if you're doing this like on a computer where you just don't have like that much that many constraints on your computational power, it's not that expensive, I think. Or well, maybe the primality test actually becomes that expensive. But basically, the moment that you need to do this on the EVM or something similar, it becomes very, very expensive. So what you could leverage is that you have somebody commit to the prime, and if somebody finds a factorization of the prime, they submit a challenge and they slash you or something.
Right.
Like you could do this in the very like sloppy way like that. That instead of like doing it straightforward, like it is a prime, you will say it is a prime until proven otherwise.
Maybe I don't know if the RSA challenge is still on, because maybe that's the next version of this, right? Is to put some bounties on chain and say, hey, if you can crack this, then your reward is submit the transaction.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically it.
Okay. Huh.
Essentially, like if you don't do the prime verification on chain, you essentially you would say that this guy gets to make this withdrawal if they factorize this number.
Okay.
Because they're able to fake an RSA proof. Right.
One other question that I had, when you were saying we have a hashing function that's growing into like a prime set, that is only doing this hashing until you detect that you have a prime, right? There's no like magical construct that I'm missing, or you would just maybe build a lookup table ahead of time, so you were mapping vector indexes onto this lookup table of primes.
You could do that. You can leverage like pre-computation. You can do pre-computation to maybe reduce the computational time, but then you do the storage. You have a storage trade-off.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you're doing it as a smart contract. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm always thinking of it in the like if it would be implemented in something like now, and just you need to store the numbers somewhere.
Right. I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Or any other thoughts that came up? Either it could also be from Georgios or.
I was a little bit wondering, so the history you mentioned, you sort of said like, oh, something in 1994. And then we don't know, and then Benedict.
There were.
So I'm just curious what happened in that middle. Like I'm curious if this has been used for.
I don't think that I haven't. So the thing is that previously, like these accumulator schemes, they work with a trusted database manager. So usually you would have like somebody who maintains the accumulator, and they give you the proofs and everything. So this is like there has been work done work has been done like towards like making this work without a trusted entity, so that you're able to verify that the accumulator state is valid. Also, like previous constructions, so basically what did these guys add? The previous constructions, they do not have like this aggregation of the proofs, so you weren't able to aggregate or batch as efficiently. And also the vector commitment scheme, like usually like you need to initialize it somehow. So when you initialize it, previous schemes, they had like complexity of O of n or more, while theirs, it has like constant complexity. And also it also has like proofs of constant size. So there's like various improvements. It's literally, like, it's not a new technique. It's basically just improvements on previous techniques, but the improvements are big.
Mm.
And there have been multiple papers. And there's also another type of accumulator called pairing-based accumulators, where they utilize, like they add two curves and they use that to perform like more efficient operations.
And I imagine, but maybe just confirm this, it doesn't have anything to do with Benedict Bunce's work on bullet proofs, does it?
I do not think so.
Okay, I didn't think so either, but I just wondered if there was any connection there. Should probably ask him.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then I guess we could wrap up for today. Do you have any closing remarks from your side, Georgio? Maybe maybe if people are interested in this RSA accumulator in practice, you mentioned something about plasma.
I'm very interested in implementation. So there are a few like people who are working on implementations, but they all require that you do arithmetic on 2000-bit numbers, which are like very costly to do. So I'd be interested in that. For plasma, I'm not sure if this will have like practical applications because it's very, very expensive. Because normally we say that in plasma you need to commit every block that happens on the sidechain on the mainnet, and this costs like 40,000 gas. This 40,000 gas over a year, it is some large number in dollars.
Yeah.
And this is just for storing one word. And if you want to do the verification of the accumulator for each state transition, because you need to do it on chain, the costs to maintain the chain, they go up like 10-fold or 20-fold. So it's interesting, like to design. I think it's interesting to design a chain that supports this natively, but I'm not sure like about I'm not like getting very optimistic about the actual practicality of it.
Okay.
Can I ask you one other question? It's like, what got you excited about this specifically? What was it?
I was excited for plasma, but it turned out to be
Oh.
Yeah, but it's like a very interesting like scheme, nonetheless.
Yeah, well, I'll give you some quality data advice. When one door closes, hopefully another one opens, right?
Yeah. And basically now I'm just preparing a post where I'm just like going to describe like each technique that has been proposed to use this in plasma and why it's not like very optimal.
Cool.
Yeah, because basically what we need currently is just a way to make the UTXO set more compact. And that's all that's needed. And it's basically this technique was a way to do UTXO commitments like much more efficiently, but it turns out that it's still too expensive.
Fair. And it's good that also that there wasn't or it didn't need to have a trusted setup, that there was a way to do a trustless setup.
Yeah, the trustless setup,
RSA.
the multi-party computation is fine. Like I don't know, I find it fine.
I think it's definitely not bad. It's just annoying when you're going to need to do a ceremony each time you change this setup.
I agree on that. But the ceremony, basically, the trusted setup, the problem is the effort needed to make the setup trustless, in a sense.
Right. Yeah. Everything looks good on paper, and then these humans get involved. Man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a strange note to end on, but we might be ending there today. So thank you everybody for joining the study session. Thank you to to Georgios for leading the session. That was great.
Totally.
Thank you.
All right, so yeah, thanks for everybody who's watching later. You can find us in Telegram, and we'll be sending out the schedule for the next weeks. So
Yeah.
stay tuned.
We have
Is there
two. I think so. Wait, there is, right?
Yeah, we're just confirming everything. I think in the next 2 weeks we will have one talk on Sigma protocols, and we will have another talk looking into fiat Shamir heuristic.
Which is good.
So what is this, how it's working? I mean, we kind of lean on this a lot as we're exploring these different zero knowledge setups. So yeah, looking forward to both of the sessions.
Totally. And day-wise, I think we're still finding our exact groove and like timing. So it might move around a little bit, but we are going to try to cater as much as we can to the West Coast. So doing these later evening European time things. That's like your morning in the West Coast.
Thank you. The one West Coaster, I think that I am appreciates it greatly.
But yeah, we're gonna keep doing that. If it's just day wise, I know that like over the next 2 weeks, I think it might flip around a little bit. Maybe eventually we actually get a fixed point, but I think we're gonna probably do this until that happens. So just
Cool.
bear with us a bit. Nice, cool. So I'm gonna stop it now. Thanks everybody for joining.
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
And we can continue. Were there any open questions actually, Matthew?
I think the one open question was if we can swap in Starks, instead of having an accumulator of a Merkle tree, if we could use a vector.
So that might be something worth dropping in, maybe worth dropping in the chat. Anytime there's to anyone who's just joined us.
Well, so the reason, so that the Starks guys love their transparency, they like a trusted setup and other nice properties, so they don't want to use all this crypto.
So we know the answer, but just in general, if we do like for future sessions, if we do end up with like these open questions, that's what we end up doing with them is we just drop them in the group and we see if there's like there seems to be a conversation almost every time we do that, at least a little bit. So that's our plan. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Oh yeah, and if anyone wants to lead one of these, that is also something that we are encouraging people to do. So get in touch with us if that's interesting. Just leaving it there.
Yeah,
Cool.
just reach out to Anna or I on Telegram or any other of those fine online websites, but probably Telegram is your best bet.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.